love running no color lights. When the runways are running the night, impossible comes true, it's hanging over you.
So before we formally start to our video, let me present to you the objectives of this lesson. So at the end of the lesson, we will be able to describe or define ethics, explain the other aspects of fairness, determine the relevance and ethical issues in assessment, examine how ethics are considered in preparing and administrating an assessment, and lastly, recommend action to observe ethical standards in testing.
What is ethics? It answers the questions: what is morally right and wrong? What is good or bad behavior? And it is a set of moral principles. Example: Code of Ethics for Professional Teachers of the Philippines. How about ethics in assessment? The term ethics in assessment refers to a fair and transparent assessment process that does not discriminate based on gender, sexual orientation, ethnicity, religion or belief, age, class, or disability.
Assessment is used to form judgment on nature, score, and extent of students' learning. For formative purposes, it drives instruction. If students' assessment scores are used different on what they are intended, then there must be an ethical issue there. Teachers' assessment have important long and short-term consequences to students. Thus, teachers have an ethical responsibility to make decisions using the most valid and reliable information. This is according to Russell and Irason, 2012. Other aspects of fairness include student knowledge of learning targets in assessment, opportunity to learn, prerequisite knowledge in skills, avoiding student stereotyping, avoiding bias in assessment tools and procedures, and accommodating special needs.
As mentioned by Wendy, the first other aspect of fairness is students' knowledge of learning targets and assessments. This aspect of fairness speaks of transparency. What is transparency in assessment, by the way? Transparency is defined as disclosure of information to students about assessments. This entails publicly disclosing assessment information to students so that they will be aware of what learning outcomes are to be assessed and evaluated, assessment methods and formats, weighting of items, allocated time in completing the assessment, and grading criteria or rubric. By informing students regarding the assessment details, the student can adequately prepare and recognize the importance of assessment, meaning the students become part of the assessment process. With this, assessment becomes learner-centered since students are the ones who are primarily assessed and evaluated. On the other hand, giving students sample assessment may help them evaluate their strategies and current levels of understanding. For example, when a teacher discusses another topic, he or she will begin by questioning, and by doing so, a student will know to what extent he or she is knowledgeable about a certain topic. In a performance assessment, the scoring criteria should be known or made public. The criteria should be divulged prior to assessment. For example, If a teacher requests that a performance task be created, there must be criteria or rubrics that must be shared with the students prior to the performance task being assigned. As a result, the students would recognize the quality of what the teachers expect in the given performance task. Task-taking skills is another concern. Task-taking skills are cognitive skills that allow students to undertake any task-taking situation in an appropriate manner and to know what to do before, during, and after the test, it is said by Duden 2009. For example, some students may be good in answering multiple-choice test items than other students. They may have developed task-taking skills and strategies like reading the directions carefully, reviewing the test, answering easy items first, reading the STEM and all the options before selecting an answer, marking vital information in the STEM, eliminating alternatives, and managing test time effectively.
Ladies and gentlemen, please make some noise for
opportunity to learn. Okay, what is opportunity to learn? Opportunity to learn, or OTL, refers to the inputs and procedures within a school context that are required to produce student accomplishment of planned outcomes. And also, according to Macmillan 2017, asserted that fair assessments are aligned with instruction that provides adequate time and opportunities for all students to learn. So, it means it is important that the school and the teacher can provide the materials that are needed and enough for the learnings of the students. In this way, all students have a fair opportunity to learn. So, kinahanglan jud nga ang mga teacher or ang school mismo mo provide sila sa mga materials nga need sa mga bata nga maka-learn. Unsaon man pagka-learn sa mga bata kung kuwang ang mga materials, di ba? For example is, ang teacher naghatag siya og task sa mga bata nga mag-research through using books. Ang library naa siya'y books pero dili siya enough para sa mga numbers sa mga estudyante nga mogamit og libro. So in that way, it may cause unfair opportunity to learn kay dili man tanan maka-learn kay ang uban ra may makagamit sa libro, ang uban dili sila makagamit kay tungod kuwang og materials ang school. So, another example class. If the school offers a cookery subject, the school should provide a kitchen room that is complete and enough kitchen materials that can supply all numbers of the students who take the subject cookery. So, sa ingana nga sitwasyon class, na ay fair opportunity to learn. Tanang mga bata, tanang mga estudyante na ay opportunity nga maka-learn. Dili lang kay katurang uban nga part sa uban nga estudyante, kundi ang tanan. Kaya nga naman, ang materials nga naa sa kitchen, enough para sa mga estudyante. Silang tanan makagamit anang butanga ug silang tanan na ay ma-learn. Okay, class, let us move forward with the prerequisite knowledge and skills. Anybody knows what is prerequisite? Okay, prerequisite is anything you need to know or understand first before learning or understanding some new. Example is you would need the prerequisite of knowing how to walk before you can learn to run. So class, here are some explanation about prerequisite knowledge and skills. First, students may perform poorly in assessment if they do not possess background knowledge and skills. So, student may not perform greatly if they lack background knowledge and skills. Meaning, if walay alam magdaan ng estudyante bahin anang butanga, maglisod jud siya learn or catch up for. For example, ang teacher gahatag or nagadiscuss siya about sa algebra. Unya, ang iyang mga estudyante walay background or wala sila prior knowledge and skills unsaon pag-multiply o unsaon pag-divide. So, sa ingana nga sitwasyon class, mo na nga ang mga performance sa bata low kay tungod wala sila kasabot ana nga topics kay wala sila kaagi kung unsaon pag-multiply, unsaon pag-divide. Kay sa algebra nga topic kinahanglan nga makamauna ka ana og divide og multiply, unsaon pag-add, unsaon pag-subtract. So man na nga as a teacher jud, di ba? Lisod kaayo class aning trabaho sa teacher. Kay dili lang kaingon nga ang teacher magtuon sa topic nga i-discuss sa mga estudyante. Kun dili kanang trabaho sa maestra nga inastadihan ang estudyante ug unsay ilahang prior knowledge before ta mo introduce og new topics. Second is, if the assessment focuses heavily on prior knowledge and prerequisite skills, this would not be fair for the students. Unfair siya if ang basis or halos nagdepende sa background knowledge ang placement. Example ana class is ang sectioning. Na may uban nga daghan nag-knowledge aning butanga so maingon nato nga bright. Walang uban kay wala pa kaayoy knowledge anang butanga nya tungod ana kay i-separate sila og section though parehas ra sila or ang isa kay mas maayo og cognitive abilities wala lang nabal-an kay dili ka na ang gibasihan. Una class, ang knowledge sa bata or ang skills sa mga bata lahi-lahi. Muna, kung ang gihatag nga assessment sa teacher bahin lang sa solving problem, syempre, ang makatubag graduate pud ato ang life skills nga kamao mo solve. Ang mga bata nga naay skills on write easy writings. So dili sila makaingon nga bright kay ang gihatag nga assessment mahitungod raman sa solving problem. Muna nga kinahanglan ng assessment lahi-lahi jud dapat ang ihatag, dili lang kay usara ang basihanan. The last one class is, to be fair, the teacher must identify on the prerequisite skills necessary for completing an assessment. The teacher can analyze the assessment items and procedures and determine the pieces of knowledge and skills required to answer them. So, kaning nga part class, para ma-fair, kinahanglan ang teacher ma-identify nila as early ang mga prerequisite skills para makahimo na sila og assessment daan nga naanay standard level sa background knowledge. For example, ani class is ang sectioning. Kinahanglan nga ang teacher dili lang kay usa ka buok assessment ang ihatag sa matag estudyante. Kinahanglan mohatag sila og assessment nga lahi-lahi og context. Kanang nay assessment nga para sa cognitive skills, nay assessment para sa solving skills, nay easy skills or more. So sa ingana nga part class, fair na siya sa mga bata. Kaya nga naman, ang mga bata or ang mga estudyante lahi-lahi og skills. Sa ingana nga pamaagi, ang result ana sa ilahang tubag sa every assessment, ana nato mahibaw kung kinsa joy ang ngayon ibuton sa section 1 or sa section 2.
Hello everyone, good day. I am Emily Kwamag and today we will talk about avoiding stereotyping in assessment and also the 5 concrete changes to psychoeducational assessment. First, what is stereotype? A stereotype is a generalization of a group of people based on inconclusive observations of a small sample of this group. Common stereotypes are racial, sexual, and gender remarks. Stereotyping is caused by preconceived judgments of people one comes in contact with which are sometimes unintended. For example, a teacher employed in a city school may have a low expectations of students coming from provincial schools or those belonging to ethnic minority groups. There are also those of gender, race, or culture. For example, a professional teacher may believe that since education program is dominated by females, they are better off as teachers than males. Teacher should avoid terms and examples that may be offensive to students of different gender, race, religion, culture, or nationality. Stereotypes can affect students' performance in examinations. Steele and Aronson, 1995, developed the theory of stereotype threat, claiming that for people who are challenged in areas they deem important like intellectual ability, their fear of confirming negative stereotypes can cause them to falter in their actual test performance. For instance, a female student was told that females are academically inferior in mathematics may feel a certain level of anxiety, and the negative expectation may cause her to underperform in the assessment. To reduce the negative effects of stereotype threat, simple changes in classroom instruction and assessment can be implemented, such as encouraging diverse students that they can excel at difficult tasks, that any responsible student can achieve high standards, and also by ensuring gender-free and culturally unbiased test items. A school environment that fosters positive practices and supports collaboration instead of competition can be beneficial, especially for students in diverse classrooms where ethnic, gender, and cultural diversity thrive. Stereotype threat can be difficult to combat for the simple reason that it often goes unrecognized. But incorporating these strategies into your teaching practice, you can begin to silence the dialogue that inhibits students' performance and build an environment that allows each of them to realize their unique potential. There are 5 concrete changes to psychoeducational assessment. First, be careful in asking questions about topics related to students' demographic group. This may inadvertently induce stereotype threats even if the information presented in the test is accurate. Next, place measures of maximal performance like ability and achievement tests at the beginning of assessments before giving less formal self-report activities that contain topics or information about family background, current home, environment, preferred extracurricular activities, and self-perceptions of academic functioning. 3. Do not describe tests as diagnostic of intellectual capacity. Next, determine if there are mediators of stereotype threat that affect test performance. This can be done using informal interviews or through standardized measures of cognitive interference and test anxiety. And lastly, consider possibility of stereotype threat when interpreting test scores of susceptible typecast individuals. To lessen stereotypes, we should be mindful to our words. There are things that we need to consider in looking into students. Also, if student got low scores to an examination, it doesn't mean that he or she is dumb. We have different skills and abilities in the fields that made us smart and intelligent. And lastly, we should value everyone's differences in terms of gender, race, cultures, and tradition.
Biased assessment is really not ethical and must be avoided at all times. Educators must construct an assessment that is free from bias. Fairness demands that all learners are given an equal chance to do well and get good assessment marks or scores or rate. Teachers should not affected by factors that are not included in assessment or for example, personal feelings or personal opinions towards things and such that is not relevant or that is outside the assessment. The student's behavior or attitude in the classroom must not reflect the assessment scores or their assessment scores. For, again, based on the ethical standard that is set earlier, the assessment scores of the student must be based only to the assessment alone. Good day, everyone. So, how is your week?
We're fine, Mom.
Okay, this is Monday, but today is Monday, but I'm sorry to say that I will be giving assessment for today, and it is oral assessment or oral recitation. It is easy, you don't have to worry about it. The assessment is entitled He or She. Do you have any ideas what is this all about?
No, Mom.
Alright. I will be giving several questions to you, and all you have to do is to answer if is it a he or a she. Okay? Are you now ready?
Yes, Mom.
Now compose yourself or I will start. Alright. The first question is, who cries the most? He or she?
She, Mom. She, good Mom. She, ng babae laki.
Fabulous! You're all correct. The answer or the correct answer is she. Okay, class? Next question. Who are more responsible in school? He or she? She, of course. We girls are more responsible at schools. Oh my god, the boys look so offended. Again, that's correct. Now I can say that most of you are able to distinguish the differences between women and men. But isn't it stereotyping? Biased assessment is really not ethical and must be avoided at all times. Educators must construct an assessment that is free from bias. Fairness demands that all learners are given an equal chance to do well and get good assessment marks or scores or rate. Teachers should not affected by factors that are not included in assessment or for example, personal feelings or personal opinions towards things and such that is not relevant or that is outside the assessment. The student's behavior or attitude in the classroom must not reflect the assessment scores or their assessment scores. Or, again, based on the ethical standard that is set earlier, assessment scores of the student must be based only to the assessment alone.
Offensiveness happens if test takers get distressed, upset, or distracted about how an individual or a particular group is portrayed in the test. The content of the assessment may have contained slurs or negative stereotypes of particular ethnic, religious, or any other group, causing undue resentment, discomfort, or embarrassment on some directly affected students. Unfair penalization harms student performance due to test content, not because items are offensive, but rather the content caters to some particular groups from the same economic class, race, gender, or etc., leaving other groups at a loss or a disadvantage.
Accommodating special needs. What does it mean when we say accommodating? And what does it mean when we say special needs? Accommodating is used to describe a person who is eager or willing to help other people. And special needs in clinical diagnostic and functional development. Special needs refers to individuals who require assistance for disabilities that may be medical, mental, or psychological. That is why teachers need to be sensitive to the needs of students, and certain accommodations must be given especially for those who are physically or mentally challenged. The following are the legal bases for accommodation. Section 12 of RA 7277 and Section 32 of CHED Memorandum 9 Series of 2013. Section 12 of RA 7277, an act providing for the rehabilitation, self-development, and self-reliance of disabled persons and their integration into the mainstream of society and for other purposes. Section 12. Access to quality education. The state shall ensure that disabled persons are provided with adequate access to quality education and ample opportunities to develop their skills. It shall take appropriate steps to make such education accessible to all disabled persons. It shall be unlawful for any learning institutions to deny a disabled person admission to any course it offers by the reason of handicap or disability. The state shall take into consideration the special requirements of disabled persons in the formulation of education policies and programs. It shall encourage learning institutions to take into account the special needs of disabled persons with respect to the use of school facilities, class schedule, physical education requirements, and other pertinent considerations. The state shall also promote the provision by learning institutions of auxiliary services that will facilitate the learning process for disabled persons. Section 32 of CHED Memorandum 9 Series of 2013. Enhance policies and guidelines on student affairs and services. Section 32. Services for students with special needs and persons with disabilities are programs and activities designed to provide equal opportunities to persons with disabilities or PWDs, indigenous peoples, solo parents, and etc. Accommodation does not mean giving advantage to students with learning disabilities, but rather allowing them to demonstrate their knowledge on assessment without hindrances from their disabilities. It is distinct from assessment modification, as accommodation does not insinuate altering the construct of the assessment and what the assessment was intended to measure in the first place. Let us consider some situations that require accommodations. For example, for students with documentation learning disabilities who are slow in reading, analyzing, and responding to test questions, the teacher can offer extended time to complete the test. For students who are easily distracted by noise, the teacher can make arrangements for the students to accomplish the assessment in another room free from distractions, or carry out simple or innovative ways to reduce unnecessary noises from entering the classroom. For students who do not have perfect vision, the teacher can adjust and print the written assessment with a larger font. According to Thurlow and others 2000, accommodation can be placed in one of these categories, and these are the following: presentation, response, setting, timing, and scheduling. Presentation: access to instruction and assessment in the ways that do not require them to visually read standard point is allowed by the presentation accommodation. Example of presentation includes repeat directions, read aloud, use large print, magnifier, auditory application devices like hearing aids or noise buffers, large screens or braille, text-to-speech, and human reader or sign language interpreter. Response: response accommodation benefits students who have difficulty with memory, rationality, sequencing, alignment, and/or organization. It benefits many students with physical disability who struggles to provide the commentation or the response from a typical paper-pencil format. Example of response includes assistive technology communication devices, marking answer in the test booklet, use reference materials like dictionary, pencil grip and utilize typewriter, word processor, or computer without the use of help features. Setting: setting accommodation or a change in location a student receive instruction, the conditions of instructional or assessment setting, or participates in an assessment. Example of setting includes study carrel, separate room, preferential setting, individualized or small group, and special lighting. Timing and scheduling: the allowable length of time to complete assignments, activities, assessments, and the way the time is organized are changed by the timing and scheduling accommodations. This provides the students the needed time and breaks to complete activities, assignments, the time of day or number of days over which an activity will take place. Example of timing includes the extended time, frequent breaks, and the limited time. Whereas the example of scheduling includes specific time of day, subsets in different order, and administered tests in several time sessions. Fundamentally, an assessment accommodation should attend to the particular need of the student concerned. For example, presentation and setting are important consideration for a learner who is visually impaired. For a learner diagnosed with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder or ADHD, frequent breaks are needed during a test because of the child's short attention span. To ensure the appropriateness of the accommodation supplied, it should take into account these three important elements: nature and extent of the learner's disability, type and format of assessment, and competency and content being assessed. Nature and extent of the learner's disability. Time and degree of disability processed by the students should be taken in consideration in giving accommodation. For example, a student moderate visual impairment would need a larger print edition of assessment or special lighting condition. Of course, a different type of accommodation is needed if the child has severe visual loss. Type and format of assessment. Type and format of assessment are matched with the accommodation differs on the length of assessment, mode of response, time allotted, and etc. For example, a partially deaf child would not require assistance in a written test. However, his or her hearing impairment would affect his or her performance should the test be dictated. He or she would also have difficulty in assessment tasks characterized by group discussions like round table sessions. Competency and content being assessed. the level of performance or content which the assessment measures are not altered by accommodation. For example, in science, permitting students to have a list of scientific formula during a test is acceptable if the teacher is assessing how students are able to apply the formula and not simply recall.
Now let us discuss about relevance. So first, it can also be thought of as an aspect of fairness. Second, the irrelevant assessment would mean shortchanging student of worthwhile assessment experiences. So kinahanglan jud nga ato ang assessment is related jud siya aron dili mawad anugana ang mga bata nga mo buhat sa assessment nga ato ang gihatag. The third one class is assessment should be set in a context that students will find purposeful. So kinahanglan jud nga kung unsay context mausad si assessment. Dapat mabagay si context ug si assessment para makita sa mga bata kung unsa ang purpose nganong gihatag nga assessment. Kay lisod pod ug ang atong context is maghatag ta about sa kanang solving problem. Yang assessment nga imong gihatag is kanang essay. So dili jud magkapareha. Kanang kinahanglan nga magkapareha jud si context. Kung unsa si context, mausad si assessment. Ellen 2000 gave additional criteria for achieving quality of assessment. So, naay mga additional na criteria nga gihatag ni Kellen para sa quality of assessment. Una, assessment should reflect the knowledge and skills that are most important for students to learn. Second, assessment should support every student's opportunity to learn things are important. Muna nga class, kung maghatag daw og assessment, importante nga ang assessment jud mo support sa mga bata nga diin makahatag opportunity sa mga bata nga maka-learn sila about sa ato ang gihatag nga assessment nila. Is assessment should tell teachers and individual students something that they do not already know. So, na class, ang assessment kinahanglan mag-tells na siya, magsulti siya sa estudyante ug sa teacher sa wala pa nila nahibaloi. Unsa di pasabot ana? For example, through assessment, ang mga bata nakabalo sila unsay sayop nila ug unsay ilang saktong buhaton sa sunod nga laing assessment. Unya, ang teacher nga wala na kahibalo about sa skills or sa knowledge sa mga bata, through assessment, makabalo ang maestra kung unsa ang ilahang estudyante, unsay capability sa ilahang estudyante, unsay weakness, unsay strength sa mga estudyante. Muna nga giingon, assessment should tell teachers and individual students something that they do not already know. So that would be all, class.
So here are the ethical issues in assessment. There are times when assessment is not called for. Asking pupils to answer sensitive questions like their sexuality or problems in the family are unwarranted, especially without the consent of the parents. Grades and reports of teachers generated from using invalid and unreliable test instruments are unjust, resulting interpretations are inaccurate and misleading. Other ethical issues in testing that may arise include possible harm to the participants, confidentiality of results, deception in regard to the purpose and use of the assessment, and temptation to assist students in answering tests or responding to surveys.